That's the one. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to RCI TV, the very first GT3 race of 2024. Welcome, everybody, in. We hope that you've had a restful holiday season, but it's back to work, not only for us here in the box, but these drivers behind the wheel of these magnificent GT3 machines. One race already in the books this year, but that was in the Ferrari Challenge Cup car. This is the first GT3 action of the year. I'm Jesse Lee, joined by Dan Van Zutphen, who is our brand new commentator here, making his debut today. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Jesse, for that great announcement. Yes, as you say, first time here, new year, and so we need to go back to work as well as the commentators. And yeah, very excited to be here, not only for the first time commentating, but of course for a very exciting race lined up. As you say, first race in GT3 machinery this year. So I think it will be a pleasure to watch as well.
It certainly will be, and this is going to be an interesting race. It's a race back for a lot of the drivers. I talked to some of them leading up to today's race. They say, you know, I didn't really do a whole lot of ACC GT3 racing in the past couple of weeks. I definitely should have done a little bit more practice for today. Some drivers absolutely looking like they've come correct today. They're certainly on the attack almost immediately, and that is how qualifying has shaken out. The normal 15-minute qualifying session, half of that has gone to this point, and it's a close battle somewhere vaguely near the front, with the third on back quite close indeed. You will have noticed there's two different categories in the series this season, and it quite simply is put like this. If you're more of a pro driver, or you have been in RCI for quite some time, you're going to be in the pro category, which is the white numbered background. If you are newer to RCI or are a little bit off the pace, you are put into the rookies or the AM category, and that is the two splits we have here. Way more pros or top class than the second class here today, but there will be good racing rather besides. Dinak has Dinak sent €5 over to the RCI TV channel. Ooh-woos for the ooh-woo throne. Ooh-woo indeed. Dinak, thank you very much for that lovely €5 donation to the servers here at RCI. That's where all the donations, all the memberships, all that stuff goes directly back into putting on more races like this, Dan.
Yeah, as you said, to come back on the Pro-Am divisions, I expect some drivers are of course rusty, so I'm kind of guessing we see some more M drivers battling it out with the pros, which will be really exciting. Let's keep an eye out for that. So yeah, it will be very interesting.
Certainly will be. Final 5 minutes of qualifying. It's looking a little bit like this. Azure Goat out in front of the field. Mike Redford in P2. A little less than 1.5 tenths off of the ultimate pace of 57.507 by Azure. And then you've got Badowski in third place, who was the quickest in that practice session prior to us going live today. He was actually the provisional pole sitter until Azure and Redford both mounted excellent laps in the most recent minutes of the session. You've got Richard Whittle in fourth, and Zhao Manso is your top five. Keller Eraser, Shipston Varga, and now Grim Lilith inside the top 10. Now that is an interesting story. We got our first look at Darcy Pimlott. That is Neil Pimlott's daughter, making her very first race debut here on RCI TV. That is incredible to see. And just 1 month ago, 30 days ago perhaps, on one of these broadcasts, I made the mention that we've had every sort of duo you could possibly imagine on this channel. We've had couples, we've had partners married, we've had father and son, siblings, all of this, but we've never had a father-daughter, a pair, and we still don't today because Neil Pimlott's not in the race. Neil, what are you doing? But Darcy is here, and we wish her the very best of luck in her very first race.
And I think that's the great thing about sim racing. Everyone, and also especially about the inclusivity of RCI, everyone can just come on in and join the races. Siblings, as you said, daughters, brothers, sons, and I think it's just really lovely to see. Makes for some great stories on the racetrack as well.
Certainly does. And I mean, when I say we've literally had every sort of relation that you possibly can have except father-daughter, I mean that. We literally have. And Neil has ruined it for everybody. But Darcy here doing their level best to get a lap on the board here, having to navigate some of the traffic that has invalidated and have pulled off. They might just have enough time for the cars that have pulled off to get out of pit lane and run a lap. It is quite a long lap, nearly 2 minutes, as you can tell by the quickest drivers. Keith Whipple, the quickest in the AM category. Teixeira, second quickest, and Buscari, the third quickest. You've got Speedy and, of course, Darcy Pimlott also in that category. Racing for Lightning Racing, not racing for their father's team here today. Now that is quite interesting. Darcy's making their own name for themselves, not with their father's team. That's something that we don't normally see, but it is nice to see they have their own team. They're out here doing it for themselves.
Yep. Let's hope Neil is watching, or at least watching this back, because we might have an extra sign up if he hears us talking about his daughter. Because, as you said, we need a son, a father and daughter on the track.
I would absolutely love to see that at some point, even if Neil just did the last race in the champ, just to have it happen. Maybe it's also possible that Mr. Pimlott is busy on Wednesdays. That's also a possibility. Of course, some drivers, they race on the days that they have that they can do it, other days not available, which is what makes the RCI platform quite interesting. We have stuff going on pretty much every single day, and some drivers, again, we talk about Night Owl, the longest running series that we have currently in the Winter Break Championship. A lot of those drivers have told me over the years, well, the reason I run Night Owl is, well, because Saturday night's the time that I have off. But I digress. Back to the qualifying action as your GOAT still holding steady at the top of the field. That 57.507 looking just about good enough to take pole position here today. GOAT also looked good on the Monday championship race as well. GOAT carving out a name for themselves, and they will no longer take part in this session. They're going to hope that that is enough. 1.5 tenths thereabout. Back to Redford and Badowski, who are still out there setting laps. Nicholas Keller, the better part of halfway to 3/4 of the way around on their lap, as there's still time on the board. Remember, all flying laps count, even when that timer ticks down to 0.
Of course, the track is still improving as we speak, so we may see some important qualifying positions being changed throughout this, well, probably 1 minute and 30 seconds we have left. As Mohammed goes a little bit off track, isn't happy with his laps, and so will respawn into the pit lane as we see Serkan Giron. P14, 1.9 seconds off the lead. But of course, as I said before, anything can change in this improving track.
Yep, Serkan Duran trying to get another one, and that was it's going to be interesting because they will not get an additional lap. Duran's going to have to hope that this one is as good as it gets. I was looking at some of the timing, and a lot of drivers invalidating. It's somewhat easy to do that. There's a lot of runoff here at Silverstone in the UK, but unfortunately, using that runoff usually invalidates the time. Not that, though. That's fine. Dipping 1 or 2 tires off in the dirt there may have hurt the time just a little bit, but still a valid lap. Mike Redford has been overtaken by Nicholas Keller for P2. There is very little in it between them. We'll call it 1/100th of a second between Keller and Redford. GOAT still safe for the moment, but the Mike Racing 95 on a little bit of a tear, coming to the line here. One more turn. Oh, and he's not got it. He's coming down into the pit lane. Better time. What better time there would be to practice your pit in? That was certainly it. Nicholas Keller, by the way, is on a valid lap. They're the last car out there on a valid lap. There's one other one, the 777, of course, of Zodaway. But Keller's going to extend this qualifying a little bit as long as they don't invalidate this lap.
Yeah, and as you said, in validating these laps, of course, everyone is a little bit rusty, so we may see some drive-throughs. We of course hope not to see, but we may see some drive-throughs throughout the race, which could spice up quite a few ending positions in the race, probably. And as you said, Nicholas Keller still on his lap, coming down, coming down the almost the last straight now. Let's see if he can snatch pole position from Azure Goat.
It's quite close. It's just about 1 1/4 tenths the difference between pole and the outside pole position. Either way, they're going to do no worse than the front row, and that was not better. That was close, but not better than their best lap. That means Azure Goat has won the pole position here today, and I can almost hear the goat chants in the ooh-oohs from the chat. Azure on pole position, the quickest of all in the first sector. That's what the magenta sector time means. That 57.507 set in the middle of that session was definitely good enough, a mark that was insurmountable. Got close behind them, though. Keller in P2 will also start on the front row with a 57.635. Redford will have to settle for third place out there on the second row, has the quickest middle sector. They ran a 57.645, quite close indeed. Doesn't get too much further back. Badowski and Richard Withel. Shipston, Manso, Eraser, Varga, and Lilith, your top 10. Zodaway, Carlisle, Jones, Duran, Roberts, Suhaimi, Vander Uda, which I will be corrected on by Dan at some point in the broadcast. I do apologize to him. Kevin Boss, I know that one. Another Dutch, but I know his name. You got Keith Withel, who set the quickest time in the AM class and will be on pole position for them. You got Elford, Teixeira, Buscri, Spivey, and Pimlott is your 25 starters here today. What do you think about that, Dan? First qualifying in the books. What did you notice?
Well, we have some still some close gaps. Again, it's Silverstone, so what do I expect? I think it's the start. I think it will be relatively clean, but as we go out through the race, we see more. We see a more action-packed race. Of course, Silverstone. It's a track with, I think, a decent amount of overtaking opportunities. Lots of straights, so lots of slipstream opportunities to maybe just chuck some car down the inside and overtake some position. So I think it will be action packed towards the end of the race.
I think you might have a point there. Of course, also the pit stops in the race as well that they'll have to navigate at some point, and we'll see how it all works out for them. Top 30 get championship points. That will not come into effect here as there's only 25 starters. So as long as you finish 85% of the race, you will get championship points. 27 cars signed up, by the way. 25 of them have completed qualifying. Not bad at all. Typically, when we see that, a couple of cars missing, that just means they knew that they couldn't make round number one, that they'll be here for round 2, 3, etc., and so forth, and is not uncommon at all. So we'll get into that a little bit later. We'll talk a little bit about the pit requirement, which I've just noticed there is none for today. There seems to be one for the rest of the races, but it doesn't tell me. It says that there's no mandatory stop today. We'll see if that's correct or not, folks. But that is what has been indicated to me, that there is no mandatory stop today, but there is one for the rest of the season. Very interesting situation then.
Yeah, and imagine just the scenario if you hadn't or don't need to make a pit stop, which I think looking at the screen here, you don't have to. So that's something, of course, drivers need to anticipate on, which is really interesting, as you say. Maybe it's to, I don't know, chop some down, chop some rust down, and get everyone in a better race flow instead of a strategy flow. So yeah, let's see how that pans out.
Well, a look at the grid, 25 cars strong. It's RCI's first GT3 race of the year. Some interesting car choices by some of the drivers for sure. You see one of the Withels there in both Withels, in fact, in the Ferraris again. Some interesting liveries, some new, some revamped, and some returning from 2023. Hey, if it's broke, don't fix it. The nice Ground Zero livery, the chat has already pointed out. We, of course, are reading and looking at chat as we always are. We love to see who you're cheering for, and we love seeing what you're saying. Joe Dauber not in today's race, not in the Midweek Madness Championship. I call it Madness Champion. It's Midweek Masters. Tom Watts is going to come for me if I keep screwing that up, but that is what this is. It is the Midweek Masters Championship, and it is sort of its own thing. Normally, Wednesday has been a bit of an all over the place sort of series, but this is a straight up GT3 battle. There's no gimmicks here. There's no, it's not touring cars. There's not multi-class technically, though it is obviously with the two classes of category of driver. There's no multi-class in the sense that there's two different categories of car here. This is a straight up fight for an hour.
Yeah, and a straight, indeed, as you say, a straight up fight. With a lot of fighting. Of course, we don't have the full 27 drive on the grid, but at 27 or 25 grid is a lot. So I expect to see a lot of action. Let's see if we can keep up with it all today. 2 minutes and 20 seconds. Minutes before we start, and normally every driver would be thinking, all right, how much fuel am I going to put in, when am I going to make my pit stop? But as we said earlier, you don't have to do that, so that probably frees your mind to think about something else and maybe a bit more on how you should approach the race. Will you be aggressive or passive with no pit stop? Of course, you don't really get those 5 free seconds if you need to repair some damage. So maybe we will see some drivers take it a little bit easier today without a pit stop, Jesse.
Yeah, it's certainly true. Any trip down pit road today is going to be voluntary, no pit lane requirement. If you're new to RCI, that may not seem strange for you, but if you're a veteran, if you've been with us for a while, you actually know how unusual not having a stop is. I think the only championship that regularly has a race or a round without a pit stop in it is the Night Owl Championship, and that's only one of the usually 5 or 6 races that end up not having a pit stop. So very strange indeed. One blank spot on the grid here, and I've been trying to figure out what car goes into that hole, and they're not in the pit lane either as far as I can tell, and neither can Ash Bibby, our broadcast director today. So, one car is missing, and I'm not quite sure which one it is. I thought it was one of the AM cars. It isn't. It's somebody in the middle of the field, but we'll try to figure out whom that is and wheremst they have ended up today. Well, no pit stop. It is same old Silverstone, and it is no joke. It's a track that looks quite academic, but in reality is difficult to say the least. It's quite a complicated shape. It's got fast corners, slow corners, sweeping corners, chicanes. You want it, they've got it here in Northamptonshire in England. Optimum track, nothing to complain about with the weather for once. It is a bit warm, however, 27 degrees C, 33 on the track. And Dan, sort of continuing your point, what you were talking about earlier, with no pit stop, these cars, the handling characteristics are going to be completely different at the end of the race. Old tires that they haven't changed, low fuel. How have they set up the car, right? How important is that going to be at the end of the race?
Yeah, indeed. It's all about almost improvising. Of course, racing is almost always improvising, but this is something really different. So I think for the veterans here, we'll see probably some complaining about the tires. Of course, you will have more understeer, more oversteer towards the end of the race, and in those 5 minutes, you have a lot of time to think, but you're not sure about what you should and what you want to change about your setup, because of course any change could maybe ruin your car in another aspect. So we'll see probably, as I said before, a chaotic and action-packed end of the race instead of action-packed beginning, which we could also, of course, still have anyway.
Well, I kind of mentioned it a little bit ago, and I've just realized what I said might have not been true. There's no mandatory stop. I was mentioning that any trip down pit lane sort of might be voluntary, but that's not always true. You can still get penalties. You can get track limits penalties,
Of course.
drive-throughs, etc., and that will automatically send you down the pit lane. You got 3 laps to serve penalties like that, and that's a killer in a race where nobody else is having to pit. But you may see more of that. To your point, Dan, at the end of the race, the car's not handling as well. Maybe you're using and abusing track limits a little bit more. You go a little bit outside those bounds and you start stacking up limit warnings. You get that drive through after the 4th time asking, and it can all go a bit wrong. And how differently do some of these cars handle? Well, we know the Porsche, the 992, is definitely very finicky with the weight and the balance of that car. On full fuel load, it's pretty, I wouldn't call it completely stable. It's a Porsche, but it's more stable. On old tires and very little fuel, it is the equivalent of trying to keep a car on ice pointed in the right direction. I'm being a bit over exaggerated with my analogy, but it does completely change the handling characteristics of that car. I know a couple of other people have said the Lamborghini after 40 minutes is a little bit sketchy as well. Bring all of this up because there's both of those cars in the field. What will the Ferrari do? I've heard some scary moments about the Ferrari wearing out its tires early, and oh man, it could be one of those races they're not even given the opportunity to really worry about that. You've just got to rely on that setup being good enough.
And again, improvising. And as you said, I've driven a lot with the Ferrari, and I can also confirm the Ferrari is horrible on tires. So I expect they'll be probably falling a bit back, the Ferraris, towards the end of the race. Spoken about cars, I do see a lot of different cars. There's not really a OP car, a meta car, as we say in the ACC community, that really dominates the field today. Of course, we see some Ferraris and we see 2 Porsches in the top 7, 3 Ferraris in the top 5. But apart from that, it's a pretty even field car-wise.
You love to see that. You love the driver's perspective from that, as well as they group up 2 by 2, getting ready to do battle in GT3s for the first time. Folks, we're glad to have you with us, and we're happy to have you back here in 2024. This is just round 1 of a long campaign for the Midweek Masters here on RCI TV on Wednesday. Looking at chat quickly, a lot of cheering going on for many of the drivers. You absolutely love to see it. And one question, is this PC only? This is PC only today. Yes, of course. We do have WRC events that I believe are cross-platform, but this today in ACC is PC only. The 24 or 25 cars waiting to get the green flag. It takes forever down this pit straight on the GT straight. They'll be heading into Cops whenever they're released, and they are. And it's an excellent getaway for a zero goat. It's nearly 3 wide, and in fact, it was briefly for a moment. And Redford taking the inside. He's able to just about deal with the car behind him, and he's got Keller right where he wants him, to the outside of the racetrack. He's taken it. Redford up to P2. A zero goat is absolutely gone like a stabbed rat. Nobody's going to catch them for the time being. Keller has been dispensed of, and Redford has taken over P2. Badowski had a look on the both of them into turn number 1 in Cops, but he's been able to make it work. One car, the 508, has gone off. That's Peter Varga. Varga has spun completely off on the exit of Beckett's and into Chapel Curve. A couple of other cars involved. The 777 of Zodaway has also had a same fate in Chapel.
Yes, and this is exactly what you want as a leader, just a really nice quick start, and that's exactly what Azure Goat was doing. We just heard that Serkan Juran is missing the Swiss driver, sadly couldn't make it to the grid. What the reason might be, we will hear later, but as we see, Azure Goat still having an enormous lead for the start of the race, and let's see if he can keep that up.
We'll see if he can. Another car has gone off in, I believe that was Club. Another car still recovering as well. I thought I saw the 29 of Spivey in the 29 Ferrari, and I think that might have been the car that had the incident after Vale and in the Club section of the racetrack. But they all still continue going, and in Spivey's case, they're not even last yet. They were able to recover quite nicely indeed. Meanwhile, up front for Racing Team Silverstone, Azure Goat continues their excellent charge. They're being run down by Mike Redford here, but I wouldn't be too worried about that if I was an Azure Goat fan. This might be a tactic. We've seen Goat do this before. Back up the pack a little bit, save a little bit of their car for the end of the race while everybody else is using up theirs. Goat is one of those drivers that sometimes seems like they have a little extra in the tank than some of the other competitors, and they only deploy that whenever they feel it necessary. The 777, I believe that is, has had an additional incident. That is Zotaway, and they have returned to the pit lane. I saw Kevin Boss's 31 was throwing up a local yellow in one of the corners. I believe it was left field, in fact, is where that came up. And it might have been Brooklyn's, but either way, the 31 has continued, and they all are going around with the exception of Zotaway, who has returned to the pit lane at the end of lap 1.
And indeed, as we see, we had minor casualties. Oh, P2 Redford went wide and will probably lose some positions. He's just gone in the background there, but Redford wide on that Stowe, I believe. And he will lose probably 1, maybe 2 positions, as we see. Even probably much more. Anyways, so yeah, that's great pressure from the back of Azure Goat. And what I wanted to touch on is, because we have probably no stop in this race, it's all about your mentality in this race. If you push too hard, your tires will be gone in probably 10-20 minutes maybe. And then it's just about surviving, and it's really important, that mentality. If you're too aggressive, you're probably going to suffer really, really quickly in this race.
Yeah, it certainly is. Pimlot in the 81 car, they've had a little bit of an issue going through Maggots and Beckett's, and all I can say to that is, hey, who hasn't? Quite frankly, it's a rough section. If you get it wrong by millimeters, it becomes a huge problem, but they have gotten the car righted, and they are still going around the track. Zotaway hasn't disconnected mine. They're sitting in the pit lane. The 924 has just had a drama. That's the 3rd place car in the AM class. Borski has got their car sorted and is going the right way. I suspect they've had an issue in entry before they got to the Wellington straight, but they have continued on, and they are about 21st now. I think they will be when it all cycles through. Yeah, 21st, 22nd, somewhere in abouts there. The number 60 has had a major off in Maggots, and that's Tom Shipston. That was for, what was that, 4th place, I think, unless my, no, that wasn't Shipston. That was a different car in the 60s. Tom Shipston's fine, and I've lost what number that could have been. Well, what we're going to do for while we have the single file racing action here, we're going to step away from the live pictures to type some things on the back end, but you won't be missing anything. We're going to be right here with you, a little bit of radio RCI with you on a Wednesday afternoon. Zero Goat still leads the race and is maintaining that gap to Mike Redford. You know, Redford, out of anyone, should know these tactics by Azure by this point. They've been chasing each other quite frequently as of late. Azure Goat, a rising star in the RCI TV broadcast, and has certainly been on display. Certainly put people on notice near the end of last year, and they've continued their red hot start straight on into this year. They were one of the top 3 cars in Monday's Ferrari Challenge Cup Championship, but unfortunately didn't quite get that finish because of a slow pit stop. And but that didn't take away anything from their pace. In fact, they came out of the pits 9th, and I think they drove all the way up to 6th or something like that in the time left in the race. It was very good. Goat's just continuing that here today in more familiar territory for sure in a GT3, and Redford trying their best to outfox them this time. This might be the 2nd or 3rd time Redford and Goat have had a head-to-head fight. A lot of single car incidents, single car spins on the racetrack, which kind of led into what Dan was talking about earlier on, not having a big pile up. We haven't had a huge accident Most of them self-contained by a single car, which they were able to get the car righted and going the right way again. Just local yellows in different sections of the racetrack. Clean right now, looking pretty good for all those in tow. Just a reminder, no pit stop in this race here today. So everyone out there for 1 hour, 60 minutes on their tanks of fuel on the old tires as well. I think we're going to restore some live pictures to you. We appreciate you listening to Radio RCI. You can sort of close your eyes and imagine what listening to a race on the radio might have been like some 25, 30 years ago. You don't have to do that here anymore. We appreciate your patience. So back to the live pictures. Keller has gotten by. Well, actually, no, something incredibly bad has happened to Mike Redford, as I can't even, he's in 10th. Look, the number 95 Ferrari is all the way down in 10th place. They were P2 right behind the leader, and now Nicholas Keller has the quickest lap of the race and is right behind Azure Goat. But the story is something's happened to Mike Redford. He's lost 9 spots. An incredible drop, but the F2O racing team has stepped it up a little bit and is right behind Goat for the lead here, just 8 minutes after the drop of the green flag. Badowski now up into 3rd, Shipston promoted into 4th, and Richard Whittle has the 5th place spot. Keith Whittle, by the way, for the other Whittle's Wizards car, leading their class, the AM class, all the way up in 11th. Keep in mind, the highest qualifying AM car was right around 18th place thereabout. And they've been able to drive all the way up, has Keith Whittle. Has done a pretty fantastic job there. But this, the battle for the lead. Just some lovely sounds there. Just a moment to listen to. The cars driven in anger, it's quite a lovely sound indeed, and you can tell a lot. This is the helmet visor cam from Nicholas Keller from F2O, and it just goes to show you what the drivers are doing. It looks pretty benign from outside the car most of the time, but in reality, it is a delicate balancing act, and this is a fight between 2 drivers who both have what it takes to win. And don't overlook Badowski. The 45 Lamborghini, 3 different manufacturers here, all in a line now. Badowski has caught them both. Keller goes wide. Goat takes the defensive line down the inside, and that made Keller go a little bit wider, though. Had to lose the speed, did Keller. Just goes back to some of the tactics that you can use in a fight like this. Goat has the pace. I just feel like, based on prior knowledge we have with Azure, that they're almost doing this on purpose in a way to save the tires, to save the car a little bit. They're not overdriving, they're not being overly aggressive, and they're just sort of expecting, hoping that maybe Keller, Badowski fall off a little bit in the tire department, overuse the Pirelli P0s. Certainly a 3-car breakaway. Shipston in 4th place, not a current threat, kind of by themselves in the number 60 Porsche. The 777 of Zodaway has closed the garage door. They'll take no further part, and unfortunately for Zodaway, who qualified quite decently, they will get no points in today's race. Tom Roberts, Critical Success Racing. Is that a D&D reference, I suspect, on the Tom Roberts car? I suspect it is. Trying to make their way around the AM leader, but being raced for it here, quite interestingly. Off the racetrack almost entirely there was Tom Roberts. If this was an FIA race, that'd be a lap invalidated and a warning given. But it isn't, so it wasn't, so it's not. The 924, who had a spin earlier but maintained third place in their class for the time. Buscari, that BMW, has voluntarily come down pit lane. So they will drop all the way to the back of the field. They're about to get lapped, in fact, as well. No mandatory stops. There's another lunge from Tom Roberts as Keith Whittle jams on the binders here. Offensively, of course. Don't know what Buscari's intentions are here, if they're interested in returning to the race, or maybe they've parked the car for mechanical reasons. Either way, they remain in the pit lane. A little bit behind the battle for 11th place, the battle for 13th here raging. Duaimi and Bryn Jones fighting each other for that spot. Duaimi holds on to the spot. Bryn's trying to find a way to get a little bit closer. He can't overtake from that gap. Varga has closed right up to the back of Teixeira. Teixeira, Varga in two different classes. And I'm pretty confident Teixeira just let Peter Varga have that spot. No use fighting a car in a class that you're not getting points for. Discretion being the better part of valor and all of that. That's kind of what I expected to happen between Keith Whittle and Tom Roberts, but that certainly hasn't happened. And now Whittle has opened up a gap on Roberts. Here is Muhammad Afif Suhaimi maintaining over Bryn Jones. Wonder if Suhaimi's going to have a bigger fish to fry here. Tom Roberts now falling back into the clutches of the 32 car. Can't look past it though. Suhaimi's in the disadvantageous position, of course. Roberts is empowered because they have the lead of the battle currently and they can defend. Well, something's happened in the fight for P2. Badowski has caught Keller, and this is them racing side by side. Contact there. Marco Badowski has gone up into P2, and Keller has been unsanctimoniously demoted down to third. I can't quite tell what part of the racetrack that was on. Was that? That certainly wasn't into club a lap ago. Oh, big slide right there by Marco Badowski, but able to hang on to it. You have to wonder how much of that was on purpose and how much of that was just trying to carry the corner with a little extra speed. What a moment there through Abbey that time. But for the moment, Marco Badowski still holding on to P2. Keller was still the quickest lap. And here is Darcy Pimlott, daughter of Neil Pimlott, longtime racer here at RCI. And the Lightning Racing 81, continuing round. And I've always said this to new drivers, and I'll say it to Darcy as well. I would consider any debut race where you're not last and where you run all the laps to be a success. And it is impossible for Darcy Pimlott to finish in the last place position based on the early goings of this race. And now it becomes simply a job of running all the laps. And Darcy, I don't know if you'll ever see this, but if you do, you've got a chat full of people rooting for you. They want to see you cross that line tonight and cap off your first race here, me included. But for now, the Lightning Racing 81 continuing pounding around 22nd place. Peter Varga, Team Monkey Racing, still trying to sort out Bryn Jones and Suaimi, who is trying to also sort out Tom Roberts as a 2-car train turned into a 3-car train, and then now it's sort of broken up a little bit. It's a big one for Peter Varga and Team Monkey Racing. And oh my goodness, Beckett's and Chapel have claimed yet another victim. This time it's the 508 Ferrari of Peter Varga. What a dramatic off that was. Too much curb exiting Beckett's, I suspect. Take another look here. Yep, just got a little bit of the grass exiting Beckett's. Loops into the Chapel and slams hard into the interior wall. Unfortunate. You get laser focused vision on what you're doing in front of you. And that's what he would have been doing on Bryn Jones. And that's all it takes, just one tire. When you're on the limit, like these drivers are, all it takes is one tire off into the dirt, and that's what happens to you. It's a long way to wreck off, but you could tell he made it all the way to the wall. Such was the momentum of the corner. Oh, it is a big one here. That was the 29 car that has gone for a spin. That's Reed Spivey or Spivey. Either way, correct us if we're wrong, of course. But Reed's gone for one here. Was this contact? Or no, it's just curb. You can't. Oh, he mounted that ginormous sausage curve. And the curb dumped him on the exit of the corner. You can't straddle the curb in Village. That's exactly what Reed tried to do there. Once again, a lot of single car incidents here today, self-inflicted incidents that have caused this running order to become very, very jumbled up. Zero Goat has the biggest gap that they've had in the past 10 or so minutes. 1 second. Doesn't sound like a lot, does it, folks? And it's not. But to Goat, that is a mile in comparison to the pressure they were under earlier. Certainly not flinching as Azure. Badowski back in second, but after the close racing between them and Keller for P2, you have to wonder, how is Badowski going to play this? How is Keller going to play this? If Keller feels like they were roughed up, what likelihood would Keller be to return the favor maybe? Mansell working on John Eraser. Lost a little bit of time right there through that section. That could just be that it's a less than favorable part of the racetrack for the Porsche in comparison to the McLaren, which I suspect it is because the gap all but eliminated again here. Well, Dan, it's been a race that has been fraught with single car incidents, and the one major one between second and third place, they were side by side. One got sort of ejected from the racetrack a little bit. You could argue no harm, no foul because they're both in the race, but if you're Keller, you kind of feel hard done by that because you're the one that was ejected off the track and you lost a place.
Yes, it's always sour, these incidents, and especially when you're in a race, you can be really hard on yourself, but also hard on people. So it sure mentally has probably done something. I can still remember my own races where I've got into an accident, and after one mistake or one incident follows the next incident, and incident that follows the next mistake, and so on, so on, so on. So again, it's really about that, just getting back up and getting that mentality to just move on and drive the race. I mean, it happened. It is what it is, they say. And yeah, you just have to move on basically in these scenarios. Of course, it's unfortunate, but again, it's what it is.
It's easy to say that sitting up here in our comfy position where we're not behind the wheel, but you know as good as I do, Dan, when we get behind the wheel of a car, if Badowski would have done that to us, we would be out for blood immediately. It'd be like, all right, if I get back to you, I'm going to show you what that feels like. And whether that's right or wrong, people at home can make their own opinions on that, but I think race car drivers, they're like racehorses. They're designed to do one thing,
Yes.
And there's no extra processing power that you can have or that anyone has to deal with situations like that. Tom Roberts here being passed by, I believe, that's Afif Suhaimi, who they've been passed by, and in fact it is, but that looked like an awkward pass. I wonder if something happened to Roberts there for a moment that allowed that pass to, or allowed them to even be side by side for that pass. But racing drivers, interesting breed of people, as the 924 has gone off the racetrack in a spectacular way. Buskri, who sat in pit lane for a while, they've rejoined the race, but whatever troubles that car is having has not been rectified.
No, and just to get back on that incident, of course, it's always easier from the outside looking in, and
Oh, for sure.
definitely. But following this little pack, P12 with, I think it is P14, really tight again, mid-race. We'll see some battles. Ferrari leading the pack, but might, as we speak, make a mistake. Maybe because of tire wear, goes off and completely goes off now. And that's really, really unfortunate. Loses a lot of time. Can get back to track, but that will definitely hurt you mentality in this race.
Was that, did I see Keith Whittle have an incident as well? The leader in the AM class. That is Keith Whittle for Whittle's Wizards, who has had a major off. Several cars have had an additional off. I think the 81 and the 924 have either come together or they've had simultaneous incidents, but the leader in the AM class has also had an incident. But let's see here. Oh, yes. Just right into the back of Darcy Pimlott. That's the 924.
That's unfortunate. And I maybe it's just me, but I thought I saw Brent Jones also going off in this pack, the blue Ferrari.
He might have as well, yeah.
And I confused that with Whitehall. But again, Ferrari struggling as we speak, maybe. So that's really interesting. With 36 minutes to go, we quite have some time to drive. So again, it's really interesting what those Ferraris and probably also the other cars will be up to in this mid stages of the race, Jesse.
Yes, indeed. Mehdi Bouskri, the Moroccan driver, has retired the car after that most recent incident. They've had a few, and I suspect that car wasn't handling particularly well, as they had a pit stop earlier on as well, which of course not required. Usually indicates that they're trying to fix something handling wise, or maybe they got the stop wrong. It's going to be contact here. Azure Goat's going to be spun, but Alski is going to make their way through several other cars. Azure Goat has been spun out of the lead for Racing Team Sovalu. They're trying to pick up the pieces. They're going to go all the way down to 7th place, and I thought that was going to be a close one, but it was closer than it ever could have possibly have been. Was that Keller into the back of Goat? It was!
And it's really, again, mid-pack fighting, and it's really unfortunate. And then again, how do you pick yourself up from that as your Goat? Amazing start, as we saw in the first minutes of the race, and just managing probably his tires and not driving too aggressively, and then that's a very unfortunate result. And that's also a very unfortunate result.
That's Muhammad Afif, I believe it is.
Yes.
It is Suhaimi, who went in there in the corner and didn't realize the pace difference, or maybe Darcy didn't realize that there was a car bearing down on the. Oh, there's been additional contact here as well with Darcy Pimlott. It's not gone to plan. It's been a rough couple of laps for the number 81 car. They are still continuing, as it is all gone crazy. We have lost, I think. Nope, we haven't lost any additional cars. So still the 22 that we have, but just a heartbreaking moment for Azure Goat, as that was completely not their fault. I think we can agree that was 100% not on them, and there's no way that Keller meant to do that either. I think we should mention there's no way Keller meant to do that. They were too wide. He was boxed in, and he just misunderstood what his braking distance was going to be, and he was obviously on the brakes. It's just that wasn't enough, and Keller ends up spinning the leader of the race as they were too wide thereabout. All three cars racing for the lead at that point. But Badowski leads over Shipston and Keller. Your top three. Right behind them is this group.
It's a beautiful overtake from Manso in the Porsche, in the triple two Porsche there. Beautiful overtake on the outside of Stowe. Very daring. I saw him fighting the car a bit. As you said earlier, this Porsche is sometimes an animal on the track and very difficult to handle. As you see the car, that's a Ferrari. Is that... Where exactly is that, Jesse?
Oh, this is all getting a bit crazy. I've also noticed on the other side of the racetrack, Varga has had another accident. Oh, and it's just going to be a takeout there. Quite plainly to see. Cars getting into each other, and now there's a stopped 29 car backwards in that corner. We're going to take a race replay. Richard Whittle.
Beautiful overtake followed up by an unfortunate incident there.
Yeah, Richard Whittle just gets absolutely sent. The Ferrari stops, of course, trying to give the spot back. What Ferrari was that? Did you catch the number on that, Dan?
No, I didn't. I was asking myself the same question. We hear 29, the 29 Ferrari of Spivey.
That was Reed, okay.
Currently, laps 21 will probably want to go out of the way, but perhaps missed his braking point. The same probably what we saw with Azure Goat. So it's all kicking off as we see. Mid stages of the race, no pit stop. So we might already see some struggles with the car and the tires.
Yeah, it's definitely taken a toll on a lot of the drivers here. And we're just about halfway into the race, not even quite halfway into the race. It has already been a race full of, started off with a lot of single car self-inflicted incidents. We're now seeing some multi-car incidents, and that's perhaps more unfortunate. Not something you want to have to deal with. Now, keep in mind, no live stewarding here for the Wednesday champ, but there is post-race stewarding, so certainly in my opinion, Dan, there's going to be a couple things that would likely be protested after the race today.
Well, the stewards will definitely have a tough and a busy time reviewing this Wednesday race. As we see here, a battle for, I think that is P3, for P2 actually. The Porsche of Shipston has been, I think, driving pretty consistently. We have seen him, well, driving in P2 for quite some time, and will now get attacked. Probably by Nicholas Keller, but it's in a Ferrari, so how will the tires manage? Again, as I said before, the Ferrari, in my experience, is really awful on the tires, especially in the beginning. But then we come back to how do you manage it? How is your mentality in this race? And maybe the mentality of Nicholas Keller is quite fortunate for him, as he is on the back of P2.
Well, I've been accidentally calling this series Midweek Madness. It's not called that. Tom Watts would like you to know, the event manager, that this is not Midweek Madness. This is Midweek Masters. And it has unfortunately played a bit into the madness hand here today. I don't think we could have, any of us could have understood. And that was a very interesting one from Darcy there. Now, that's very interesting because they lost it on the racetrack. That tells me that those rear tires are cooked. They're absolutely done. And whenever they tried to corner, either that or there were a lot of damage on the back of that car that kept the downforce from doing the trick around the corner. In fact, Darcy still sits there on the Hamilton straight as it's known today. But luckily off of the racetrack far enough, I think that they'll be able to see them exiting club, or at least we will continue to hope that that is the case. And you know, there's a lot of things to be said about consistency in racing, and it's not all about being the fastest on the racetrack. Consistency is king most of the time, and for drivers that are looking to improve their racecraft, their race ability, and of course their consistency, I suggest, we all here at RCI suggest, you check out driver61.com. They offer one-on-one driver coaching and full-on racing schools to help hone your craft. Experts there can analyze your driving in sessions through one-on-one coaching and tell you how you can become more consistent and get quicker on racetracks and avoid
man,
incidents exactly like this, as Martin Foster has been spit out of the middle as if they were a hot dog in a bun. So if you want to avoid incidents like that, driver61.com. We're going to see a replay of exactly what happens here. A car on the outside gets a bad exit. A car on the inside, I think, is damaged and just trundling along. Keith Withel's able to escape somehow, but yeah, tried to shoot the gap and was unable to get that accomplished there.
Yep, quite unfortunate. Again, a lot of unfortunate incidents in the mid stages of this race. And is now not getting attacked. I think that's he is getting attacked by the 318 of Teixeira. And Aston Martin is there.
Yeah, it's certainly an Aston Martin, and well, I know there's a lot of people that wish the Aston Martin was a little bit more competitive. It's been competitive today for Teixeira in the AM class with all the trouble that Keith Withel's had. That car was running 11th place at one point. It's had a couple of incidents, one of which I think was a solo incident, and now there's been involved in some multi-car incidents. That has brought Teixeira right back in the fight for the AM class. Not missing anything up front. Badowski still leads over Shipston with Keller in tow. We have lost an additional car. We're down to 21 cars in the race. I'm trying to figure out what car we have lost, though it escapes me, if not only for a moment.
So, indeed, quite a lot of action. And again, the Aston Martin. I love the Aston Martin personally. It has a great sound, and I'm always sad it doesn't participate more and isn't really competitive. I remember the days of early ACC that it was, but love the sound. And again, as I said before, I love the car choice in this race. It's really different to say. We have I think all top 5 cars are different. And when I look at it, that's not true. There are 2 Porsches in the top 5. But again, lots of different cars in this race. With 25 minutes to go, we're looking at Azure Goat. Not anymore. We're looking at Mike Redford in the 59 Ferrari here, coming through Maggots and Baggots, chasing that BMW of Lilith. Let's see if some action will unfold down here, Jesse.
Somehow Lilith has been able to avoid all of the major drama today. At least I assume Grimm's been able to do that, and that is a feat in its own here today. It's been happening all around them, to be fair, but Grimm's not been involved in any of it. This might be the first real battle that Grimm's had today. They started around 10th. They gained a couple of spots, of course, but now it's a fight between Redford, who, remember, was up at the front of this field early on, and we don't know exactly what happened, but they dropped all the way down to 10th place, and they were right behind the leader when that happened, but we don't know what exactly went on with that. Kevin Boss continuing to have issues, I'm being told, and here's a replay. Dan, what do you see?
Well, coming here to I see a very early break and a very, very hard impact, and that's your race destroyed, and it's again quite unfortunate, and the stewards will definitely have a look at that. It was quite a questionable incident, Jesse.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that Ferrari. It seems to be going around quite slowly, and I wonder if it's damaged and they're just trying to limp it home for the final 24 or so minutes.
Out.
But yeah, it's I believe it's just had another incident, the number 29 Ferrari up in Beckett's. But yeah, I think other cars are coming up on them at such a clip they can't possibly judge the speed there. It is Reed Spivey, in fact. But yeah, I think they're trying to not hit this car despite it having very severe damage. And you can clearly see the pace difference is immense here. And when you're bearing down on a car like that, it's just impossible to sort of read that.
We can see the damage as well on the bodywork. It's quite a lot, probably especially at the rear with that impact of Kevin Bass. So yeah, that's unfortunate. You should probably go down pit lane in a bit. Anyway, what happened with Mike Redford? He spun out in Stowe, if I remember correctly, and he spun massively and lost. I think fell down to P14, if I remember correctly, but has made its way up to P8, the number 95 Ferrari. Doing a comeback race, probably also avoiding a bit of the mess. And that's really, as you said, avoiding the mess. Consistency is key, and sometimes you learn that the hard way. I can speak as a driver myself. So yeah, as we see in this race, again, consistency is key.
Certainly is. And you know who's the most consistent donator to the channel? It's Ash Bibby. £2
Yes.
donation to RCI TV. The message, uwu. Uwu to you. I mean, I can talk directly to you because you're listening to me, but uwu.
You, Ash.
Dan, you ever uwu? You ever do it?
I'm sometimes.
Well,
When the moment is there.
There you go. 22 minutes left in the race. Badowski enjoys a 2.7 second gap. It's the biggest gap for the lead that we've had all day. So it did just shorten a bit to 2.5 seconds. Badowski to Shipston. Keller still sort of just waiting here in the F2O car. What must Nicholas Keller be thinking? They have been in the mix for this podium all day long. The names have changed consistently, but they have been consistently there. And what a race! You wonder what penny for Keller's thoughts. Really, they've had some contact. They've made some contact. It's been one of those races, I think, for a lot of the drivers. You're going to have a lot of unhappy drivers after this one. It's going to be some thankful ones, too, that they were able to sort of miss all the major incidents.
Of course, whenever you see a driver crash in front of you, of course, it's never fun for those drivers, but of course, it's great profit for you, as we see Nicholas Keller still chasing down that 60 Porsche of Tom Shipston. And we talked about it, a Porsche is a different animal, especially with tire wear probably on the way. We've also seen a pretty big slide of Badowski, the current leader. So again, I'm still stating the end phase of this race will probably be, well, let's hope not more chaotic than the 30 minutes mark we just passed, but let's hope we have some more clean fights and probably more action-packed as well. And I wonder what's going through his mind, in the mind of Nicholas Keller. Shall I attack or shall I just save my tires behind the Porsche of Tom Shipson? Of course, the Ferrari can be difficult on tires. So, what would you do in this situation, Jesse? Go on the attack or save your tires for later on?
Well, if I'm Nicholas Keller, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, how many more times do I have to pass the car for second place to have a shot to pass the leader? I'm a little frustrated at that, but I'm also full attack mode. It's the final 20 minutes of the race. Whatever I have, and I suspect Keller has a slightly less full arsenal with the frontal damage to the Ferrari and the sliding they've done with the tires. It's not as sweet as it might have otherwise been, but they've still got to maintain for their own sake, and they certainly seem to have pace to keep up with Shipston. Not quite enough to get beside them, take the fight to them, but at the same time, this is attack mode. You can't really rest. Realistically, if Shipston makes one false move here, Keller's going to be beside him, perhaps even by him, and then who knows, maybe Keller could take the fight to Badowski still and have that grand finale, but got to get a move on. Not panic time yet. Still got 19 minutes left, but it's getting down to it. Drivers are getting a little bit antsy at this stage, but it's hard to tell. I think Keller, you asked what I would do, but what I think Keller's actually doing, I think he's somewhere in the middle, Dan. I think he's halfway between going for it and halfway between, okay, I've got to make sure I get this car to the finish. It's a top 3 finish. It's going to be a good points day, but also I'm damaged, so I've got to temper my sort of driving a little bit.
Being optimistically, realistically, as I like to say.
Hey, I like that.
So yeah, indeed. Let's see what Nicholas Keller will say. And as you said, aggressive driving, pushing, and that begs the question: will we see any drive-throughs? Because I think
Oh,
we
why'd you say
don't.
that?
We don't. Commentators curse, you know it.
Indeed.
Maybe I'll do it on purpose. Of course I won't. But indeed, that begs the question: will we see any drive-throughs? Because we haven't seen those yet, if I remember correctly.
It's true.
And it can stay that way, but it could also very much pop off in a matter of minutes. I know Silverstone; it's really a hard track on drive-throughs. I have gotten plenty of drive-throughs myself.
Speaking of drive-thrus, if you're looking to avoid those and stay inside the track limits and have a better outcome in your races, RCI recommends Go Setups. They offer esports level setups and safer alternatives that anybody can drive, and certainly they offer setups that can go a full 60-minute fuel run as well. You can get those over at Go Setups, one of the preferred setup shops in ACC right now, and we wouldn't recommend you anything that we wouldn't use ourselves. In fact, you get told all the time by drivers what setup they're using to win the race. I would say 3/4 of the time, and this is no joke, 3/4 of the time it is a Go setup. Reed Spivey could really use a Go setup right about now.
Yeah, that car is not repaired at all and should return to the probably pit lane immediately. He's also stopped. Maybe he will respawn to pit lane. Laps, of course. Let's see what he'll make of it. Going to P18 here, Adam Carlyle, in the 142 Aston Martin. Again, lovely Aston Martin once again. Not in the front, but still here nonetheless. 16 minutes to go, clock is ticking down, and the track looks quite good. I haven't seen a lot of tire wear issues so far, Jesse.
No, well, it's sort of hard to tell. There's certain cars out there that are all over the shop, but it's hard to tell if that's damage or not. There's nothing going on with Adam Carlyle. This car's as sweet as a nut. Again, another car that has largely stayed out of it. They've had a couple of battles, to be fair, but they've largely stayed out of it. Reed Spivey, by the way, the 29, has a stop-and-go 30. Now, they happened to pit road earlier on. They have come out, but they got that stop-go 30 after they slid through the grass. Now, I wonder if they got a track cut penalty of a stop-and-go 30 for cutting a significant portion of the racetrack, or if they got a drive-through that calculated immediately, and because they were sliding through the grass with a drive-through that we didn't see because we were watching them slide, they got a stop and go immediately because that counted as a second cut. Now that's very technical and it's hard to follow, but basically it's in baseball we call them bang bang plays, meaning that something happens and then immediately something else happens, and it's so quick you can hardly keep up with it. Either way, it's a stop and go 30 for the 29 car. We can assume for some sort of track limits, we're unsure of how they've got to that position so quickly after we were unable to spot a drive-through, but in some variety, they've either massively cut the track because they were sliding off, or they got a drive-through for going off, and they also got an additional warning when they had the drive-through for that moment, which would immediately upgrade that to a stop-go 30, but just absolutely frustrating. The 45 car, Badowski's off. The leader has gone off this time, and that's in Abbey. Team Monkey Racing's 45 is off in Abbey. Oh, and the car's just slow. It's just stopped. Marco Badowski's car has stopped. What on earth?
You never know what's happening, but I can only imagine a technical fault, maybe a TV shut off automatically, or a force feedback issue, anything like it. But of course, it's not very usual. We see a car like that in the lead stop somehow. He has fallen down to quite a bit P8, and in a matter of seconds.
Marco Badowski
is
Tom Shipston. Shipston leads the race. Yet another leader, Nicholas Keller. This battle that was looking for P2. The 45 of Badowski has stopped again. There's certainly a technical issue with that race car.
Yep.
It's just incredible.
Yeah, it's such a plot twist, and it's a turn of events, an unfortunate turn of events. But again, mark my words, we still, maybe not given the tire wear, we have a hectic ending, and the battle for P1 isn't over yet. Still 12 minutes and 47 seconds to go, and well, Nicholas Keller, he smells the lead, he smells blood, and is all over the back of that Porsche from Tom Shipston.
Sure is. Meanwhile, Azure Goat has driven all the way back up inside the top 5. They're right behind John Razor here for 4th place. And, well, that was close racing between several cars that were on various different laps. And I think, no, I thought that allowed a Razor to get away. It didn't. That was... This is shades of Monday, where Goat had to do this very same thing.
Yes. And while we were discussing the penalty of Spivey, I wanted to get back on that. I thought I saw him coming out of pit lane, and maybe he sped into pit lane and been given a stop and go 30 seconds for that. Who knows? We'll probably find out at the end of the race.
Well, it's a keener eye than mine. I didn't notice if that it was so quick. It happened in a flash, but it very well could have been. That is also something that happened. It's the more likely of the options, to be fair. Speeding out of pit lane, speeding into pit lane can nab you a stop and go 30. It can nab you a couple other things too, but stop and go 30, quite common for significant speeding in the pit lane. Mike Redford trying to pick a lane here, trying to figure out how to do battle with Whittle in the 957 for 6th place, navigating some of the lap traffic here, trying to make it work. 11 minutes left in the race. Shipston and Keller as close as they've been in some time. Goat trying to get by Eraser. Redford trying to get by Whittle. It's all kicking off here late in the race.
And on the outside then of Whittle, a very beautiful move by Mike Redford, which has clearly the pace advantage and has now overtaken Whittle for that 6th position in the race. Of course, again, spun out, but is now making a kind of comeback in this race. And will probably spear off into the distance of Robert Whitehall, and maybe even chase down Azure Goat. However, I don't know what the gap is, Jesse.
Yeah, it's going to be significant. I don't know if Redford's going to be able to get there, especially with the pace Goat has, but it's better. It's 11.1 seconds apparently is that gap, but I just think that's a little bit too far, a little bit too much of an ask here in the final 10 minutes. Folks, if you've noticed any audio drops in the broadcast, we do apologize. That's nothing that we can deal with. That's Discord being Discord on a Wednesday afternoon. That's well, the race has been chaotic. Discord's being chaotic, but we can only apologize completely beyond our hands in that way. But less than 10 minutes here to go, and a race win potentially to yet be settled. And you have to wonder if Azure Goat were to file a grievance with Keller for the incident that changed the hands of the leader early, and if Keller wins this race, what might that actually do for Keller's day? And is Nicholas betting on there being a report coming in and trying to win this race simply so they lose less positions if the filing doesn't go their way? It's a lot going on here late in this one.
It's exactly how aggressive are you going to be? And again, just as I said last time, what's your mentality? Does Keller want to really win this race? As we see a big slide. Again, that's Ferrari, as we see now, a little bit struggling with oversteer, albeit still on the attack. Down the inside of Tom Shipston. That's very brave, but it's a very bold move, and it pans out pretty well. However, he is on the outside now, needs to switch back on the Porsche. Has a good exit, but just not good enough, and needs to tuck back into the slipstream of that Porsche. Jesse.
Ooh. Got some good racing here late, folks, with the first one with Whittle and Redford, and now with Shipstead and Keller for the win of the race potentially between those two cars. Both these cars have been in the wars. They've seen it all inside the top 5 here today, including mechanical issues that has dropped the 45 of Marco Badowski all the way down to 9th place. That we can only imagine, we can only theorize in the booth, but to us, to Dan and I, that looked like a mechanical issue because they pulled the car off under their own volition twice, but they've got it sorted. That could have been a lot of things. That could have been a wheel issue, a monitor issue, like Dan pointed out. Also could be a very likely culprit, but whatever it is, they've been able to figure it out. But unfortunately, it looked like it was going to be a win for the 45. It's unfortunately going to be right now barely inside the top 10. Shipstead and Keller continuing to fight. 7.5 minutes to go. And it's Shipstead, Keller, Manso. Manso's had a quiet race, much to Zhao's liking today. John Eraser and Goat, your top 5. Keith Whittle, by the way, has pulled away from Teixeira. Remember when that gap was half a second? It's over 7 seconds now, Keith Whittle, back to Teixeira.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. But here, still in the lead, pressure is rising, and your heart will beat a little bit faster than 10 minutes ago with 7 minutes to go. And again, as you said, a pretty impressive gap.
Well, we've still not seen a legitimate drive-through penalty here today, and the reason I bring that
Indeed.
up for a second time is if we go drive-through penalty less, this will be the first time in the last year that I'm aware of in an RCI race, a broadcaster RCI race, that there wasn't a single track limits penalty issued. Now, that is so exceedingly rare. Consider how many hundreds of races we broadcast in a year to assume that that's not happened in over a year. That is incredible, and we're 6 minutes away from that, but those 6 minutes are the longest 6 minutes of the race. If you're on 3 warnings right now, you're trying to straddle that line between effectiveness of getting through the corner and also safe, not exceeding those track limits here. Kevin Boss and Adam Carlisle, the Lycan Racing liveried Aston Martin, giving chase to the wheelie slow 31 Lamborghini. 31's had a little bit of an adventure here today. I'd argue that Adam Carlisle may have had a little adventure of their own, but never the mind, racing each other for what would effectively be what, 16th place in class.
Yes, indeed, in class. And as I said before, we have the M cars, if I can call them M, battling it out with the pros. It's not what we're seeing here, but it's definitely happening down towards P14, P15, of course, and middle in the pro pack, which is always good to see. And I think that's the blue car of Nicolas Keller going for the lead.
Oh man! They got bunched up behind those cars that were also doing battle. What do? I know you're getting blue flagged. Oh, and that's a huge jump through the infield grass right there, through Abbey that time for Nicolas Keller. Luckily, that surely was a track limit, but it wasn't their last because they do not have a penalty. This lap traffic is absolutely bundling up the lead here, and I think that what's happened here is Carlisle has noticed it. They've backed off, and that's a very respectful thing for Adam Carlisle to have done to preserve the battle for the lead at their own expense of a position potentially gained from Kevin Boss. I guess if you're Adam Carlisle, you're hoping that Boss gets held up the exact same amount so it reignites the battle with 4 minutes left to go. But this is the leader, Tom Shipstead, in the silver and orange Porsche, making their way around what is effectively 16th place in their class, and they get it done. Well done by Kevin Boss. Did it at a place where it was most advantageous for himself, didn't lose a ton of time, and perhaps to Carlisle's benefit as well, they did gain that time back.
Yes, and it's for every car in this situation. It's frustrating. The leader wants to get by, but the blue flagged guys, they just want to race and lose as less time as possible and do yourself a favor by or overtaking the guy in front, or in Kevin Boss' situation, pull away as much as possible. And as leader, you really need to stay calm. All right, they'll let me by. At least they hope so. In this case, they did, and the lead for the fight, or the fight for the lead, remains. It's still really close. However, Nicolas Keller, because of that lapped car, the gap is a little bit bigger, Jesse.
Certainly is. As we close in to the final moments of this race, just want to remind you that we couldn't do this without AK Esports. They're a leader in esports racing and esports management. They're an Italian company, and they certainly help us with things like servers and hosting. And for more information on how AK Esports can help you with your event or series, go to akesports.it. Final 2.5 minutes of the race, several battles, positions still very much in contention here. Redford was able to get by Whittle, Richard Whittle that is, but Whittle now making their way back up to Mike Redford here in the closing moments.
Indeed, it's not what we expected. Mike Redford really had the pace advantage a couple of minutes ago, but is now chased down by Richard Whitehall in the black-purple Ferrari. Of course, both Ferraris, so tire wear effect is basically the same. It's up to the driver now how well you manage your tire and how much you can attack in the closing stages of the race. With 1 minute and 50 seconds to go, we have 2 laps, I guess, to see if those guys can change
it's going to be close,
positions.
Dan.
It's going to be really close.
It might be the last lap. I don't know. It's super close.
As Tom Shipston now passes the back marker, that's Pimlott again in the 81 McLaren. Keller doesn't really get the slipstream.
Oh, what's going on there?
And that's a touch, and that may be damage, Jesse.
Yeah, it might well be. That's very strange. This corner in particular, Stowe, just seems like Keller is able to get such a better run into the corner than Shipston does.
Yes.
It definitely doesn't help their exit, though, as Shipston seems to have a better exit. But into the corner, I just feel like Shipston's just super aggressive and able to close up. But the run off with Shipston is where they're winning out here. The final couple of cars that they're
close.
passing. Yeah, Dan's right. This is going to be super close to the line. They may get there with 1 or 2 seconds left, or it might be the opposite. They may get there 1 or 2 seconds late to the line. That's how close this is going to be. Talking about a 157 in qualifying. They're running nowhere near that here. They're running 158s, 9, something like that. But when we saw them in Maggots and Beckett's, there was a minute 46 left. So, oh my goodness, that's so incredibly close. We'll have to see. 26 seconds, 25 seconds left. This could be the end, folks. They could get an extra lap here, but the gap is so big. If it is a second or two, Tom Shipston might be able to let off of it. I don't know. This is going to be very close. 12 seconds, 10 seconds. Dan reckons they're going to make it. Ground Zero Racing's hoping that they don't. They don't want to have to defend for another lap. It's 4, 3, 2, 1. They made it with 1 second left. It was 1 second on the clock. It's an extra lap of racing here for Midweek Masters. Tom Shipston leads.
And how much will it matter? 1 second. Shipston is increasing the gap. Maybe save the tires for the absolute last to secure that victory. It's going to be close anyway, and I already know what's going down in the head of Keller. Gave me 1 more lap. It's always that 1 lap you miss. So we're coming down the finish line, and I think, I don't want to curse Shipston, but he's gonna run away with it.
The other thing I'm worried about is if this is technically an extra lap of fuel that these drivers didn't expect to need, considering how close a lot of these teams will be have been looking to get to their fuel number, to their empty weight. That could be a problem. I don't know if it'll be a problem specifically with these cars, because if Shipston didn't think he'd make it, he would have just let off. He had a gap enough. It was only a second. He could have given it up. But there's likely other cars out there that are quite close on their fuel number. We've seen cars run out here before, but Shipston looks like the race is in control. Keller's lost a little bit of ground, and they've not made it up. They are a few turns away from winning a race that I can almost guarantee Tom did not expect to be running up in front. But for Ground Zero Racing, it's been another brilliant showing from them. They've kept their nose clean for the majority of the race, and that was the secret to success today.
It's incredible a race. It's so chaotic, but so eventful nonetheless. Down the line, it's Tom Shipston in P1 coming down the line. He doesn't give it away. It's only threaded out on the floor with your pedal to the maximum. And it's Tom Shipston that wins the first GT3 race of the year, followed by the Frenchman Nicolas Keller of F2O Racing Team. João Manso, the Portuguese in the Triple 2, will finish up the podium with the McLaren of John Eraser, the Swiss driver, in P4. And then as you go, your pole position leader finishing in P5 and rounding off the top 5, Jesse.
Yep, the top 5 in the barn. Redford, Richard Whittle, Grim Lilith next to come across the line. Badowski, who took the lead after they basically all the podium drivers at the time ended up in each other's lap. Marco with some sort of bizarre mechanical issue that plagued him for a lap and a half. That took them all the way down to 9th. They certainly still finished. Going back to Azure Godes, the final drivers in the top 10 are finishing for Azure. They got pole position, so that'll be extra laps. So they may have finished 5th, but they will certainly likely be credited with points that more likely reflect a P4 or even P3 finish here today. But the Dutchman comes across the line. Dan, tell me how to pronounce his name properly.
The Dutchman comes van der Woude, Alexander van der Woude.
Lovely indeed. Van der Woude comes across the line. Everybody finishing up. Suhaimi had an eventful race. They are across the line. Bryn Jones and Tom Roberts. But Keith Whittle for Whittle's Wizards, what an adventurous day it was for the AM driver. They're going to get the win anyway. They were off the track, they were ran into, etc. and so forth, but they outlasted them all. And Keith Whittle wins it for Whittle's Wizards in the AM class. And Bruno Teixeira finishes P2. And I think after all of that, Spivey still finished 3rd in that class. With all the issues that 29 car had today, they still take home 3rd. Here are the results, of course, pending any post-race penalties. If there are any that have changed the order, we'll talk about that next week. Wow, what a race, Dan. What are your thoughts after an hour of that? That felt like a marathon.
Now, that is a proper way to start the next year, 2024. And I think a worthy race for 2024. It's chaotic to the absolute maximum, but nonetheless, really, really eventful. I really enjoyed it. The minutes felt like almost hours, and I can't imagine how it was for the lead guys there to suddenly be in P1, Tom Shipston, and to tick away these laps and just wanting it to end. But a really eventful race nonetheless, Jesse.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Just a few things we need to take care of before we go tonight. If you're looking to upgrade your sim rig, no matter if it's just a pedal box or a rim or a full-on rig upgrade, you can find out how you can do that with all the top equipment from all the top brands, brought to you by Digital Motorsport. They have a little bit of everything for everyone to up their game, and they also include a sim rig builder. Build the sim rig of your dreams or your budget at digitalmotorsport.com. And while you're over there, take a look at the excellent selection from Fanatec. Fanatec, a leader in direct drive sim racing hardware. You know the name. I don't have to explain to you who Fanatec is, but go visit them. Fanatec.com. Check out maybe some of their bundles that they've got going on here and the different direct drive options that you may want to select. And also, not to mention, the excellent pedal selection that they also offer as well. Wow, what a race it was. Round number 1. Called it all week in my head. Midweek Madness. Seems like an apt term, but it was the Midweek Masters round number 1. How much of that, Dan, in your opinion, was sort of winter rust, not racing for a few weeks maybe, or how much of that was just drivers chomping at the bit, ready to get back to racing?
Well, you say midweek madness is wrong, although this race was quite the madness in any case. But I think quite a bit of rust, and I think maybe quite a bit of newcomers as well that played a big part in the role. Maybe not used to blue flags that much, or side by side racing in any case. So I think it's a bit of rust, but also a bit of newcoming chaos, if I may say. Um, but yeah, I think especially the front guys. Of course, the leader, I forgot his name. Badowski, of course, really unfortunate with the technical issue, but given the rust, I don't think there was that much rust.
Well, there you have it. Speaking of Dan Van Zutphen, you will be in your home next week for Midweek Masters. We're going to Zandvoort pre F1, pre modern F1, Zandvoort anyway, without the high banks, but we will be at Zandvoort for round number 2. Some of the rules are different for that round, a mandatory stop and all that. We'll talk about that and the fallout from round number 1 next week. We'll be right back here at the same time and the same place. On top of that, we also want to talk about some of the other races we've got going on. If you haven't heard, we're doing mini sims now, not just one, including iRacing. The next iRacing race is the actually, I don't know what the next. I know the previous one was the Daytona race. I've just realized that it's not an iRacing race coming up. It's the we got AMS2 on deck coming up January 16th. It's Group C's, old Group C cars around Road America in AMS2. And folks, let me tell you something. I know what you think about AMS2, but I, I'm a professional. Trust me. If you haven't driven it lately, you owe it to yourself to give it a shot. It is so different than it used to be. And hey, it's going to be fun. It was fun whenever we did the Nürburgring race. You're going to want to join in for that as well. Most of the drivers that participated in the Nürburgring 60-minute race that we did absolutely enjoyed it. They'll be back. We've already got some significant signups, haven't we, for that? Yes, we have. Still time to sign up for the AMS2 race on the 16th. Of course, additional iRacing races yet to be posted, but that will be back with us. The conclusion of the Daytona 2 hours and 40-minute race. What a brilliant race. I think there was 27 or 37 cars entered in that race. It was spectacular. I talked to some of those guys. They had a lot of fun. Stay tuned for more of that. And as always, the WRC RaceNet group is always doing rally stuff. So doesn't matter if you're on console, PC, get involved with some rally stuff, have some fun, and maybe get featured here on RCI TV. We go through the results of those events. But as for now, we'll see you back on Monday for round number 2 of the Ferrari Challenge Cup at Kyalami. Dan and myself and Ash, of course, will see you on Wednesday for the continuation of Midweek Masters. Thank you all for being with us. A big thank you to Dinak for the €5 donation and Ash Bibby for the £2 donation today. That goes straight back into paying for servers for RCI's future so we can host more races for you to enjoy. Dan, final thoughts.
Final thoughts. Pleasure to be there next week. Pleasure.
Certainly was. What an excellent start it was for you. Dan Van Zutphen, his first race with us here at RCI, an absolute smash success. It's going to be awesome. You're going to be with me for the rest of the series. Can't wait to get there. Folks, it's been a pleasure bringing you the race. We hope that you've enjoyed today's broadcast. Have a nice rest of your week and weekend. We'll see you next week. I've been Jesse Lee, joined by Dan Van Zutphen and Ash Bibby behind the cameras. Until next time, have a
Goodbye.
good night.